everyone, and welcome to Thrive Tribe. I'm your host, Megan Scheibner, and here at the Thrive Tribe table with me, again, is my co-host, Dr. Steve Scheibner. And Steve, how are you today? And be honest, this is for posterity.
Well, frankly, I'm great. Never been better. To tell you the truth, I'm feeling robust.
Well, good. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to lie, but it's been a rough week, and I just transparently speaking, it's been one of those tiring weeks in our house.
Oh, really? Yeah. It sounds like there's more to what you're saying than what you're really saying.
Well, you've probably figured out by now our topic this week is lying, and we're going to talk about who lies and probably of more interest, how do we know if someone's lying to us?
How do you tell if somebody's lying?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so we'll be doing some defining and some explaining. But Steve, just to get us started, how do we want to lay the premise for this episode?
Well, we want to talk about, I think there's 7 or 8 different areas that you can identify lying. Before we jump into the specifics of all of that, I want to be really careful, okay, with this one, because you could become the lie police, and be the gotcha person who goes, aha, I saw, you twitched your nose or you riddled your ear and I know you're lying, and again, there's a real temptation to become armed with a little bit of the facts, and all of a sudden you become that pariah in everybody else's life, identifying all these liars. And the fact of the matter is you're probably way off base with a lot of stuff. Sometimes people wring their hands because it's cold, right? The classic one is, folding of the arms. They're defensive if they're folding their arms. Well, not if you got a thin shirt on and it's only, 62 degrees in the room. You're going to be kind of cold. You might do that just because you're cold. So there's a lot of reasons why people behave the way they are.
Or you're a 13-year-old girl.
Or
every 13-year-old girl stands like this, yeah.
So the point here is you got to listen to the whole thing, right? We're gonna lay out all 8 of these areas, and then we're looking for what we call clusters, right? If you're going to identify if somebody's lying to you or they're not telling you the entire truth, which is the same as lying, we're going to look at that. My background in this area goes like this. I was a senior pastor of a church for 10 years. I also was an officer in the Navy for 29 years. Okay, and with those 2 backgrounds, there was a lot of specific training in how to discern whether people were being truthful or not, right? And then all of the experience of being a pastor, and you and I did tons and tons of counseling, right, over the years, counseled hundreds of married couples and parents and children and everything. We got pretty good at discerning whether somebody was telling us the truth or not.
Not to mention we had 8 children.
8 children of our own, right?
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't make you an expert, but it gives you a lot of experience in lying. Now, one of the things we want to say about lying right off the bat is everybody lies.
Yeah.
Okay. And you might not like that. It might make you uncomfortable, but every single person lies. And the statistics go like this. The average person, all the way from the most pious old lady churchgoer that sits in the second pew and always amens and nods at the pastor's sermons and writes little handwritten notes and just is an absolute saint, all the way down to the guy who's spending life in prison for some horrible crime. The average is 10 times a day you tell a lie. Okay,
well, Steve, even sitting here, that caused me to bristle a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Because I don't think of myself as a liar. Right. But let's define or expand what lying is, because we want to narrow it, right? It's like when we're trying to discuss something with our children and they're looking for the loophole, we would say, well, I didn't tell a bold-faced lie. Right. But what does lying encompass?
Right. So I'm painting with a very broad brush right now. I'm going all the way from the one extreme of exaggeration, which is a form of lying. When you say, I was up all night with that project. I've worked 80 hours on that paper. Well, you probably didn't work 80 hours on that paper. You probably weren't up all night. That's an exaggeration. It's a lie. All the way from that, what we call little white lies, all the way to the big whopper of I didn't do it. I didn't have sexual relationships with that woman, right? Well, we found out later that was just a big bold-faced lie, right? So there's the whole gamut of lying, And so we're going to include everything in the category of telling a lie.
But even if it's just exaggeration, although we may not call it lying, the people who interact with us, or, exaggeration, little lies, little things we leave out of the conversation, pretty soon we're going to get characterized by other people as someone who's not truthful. And I looked up some synonyms for liars, okay?
This ought to be good.
The synonyms for lying and liars are dishonesty, untruthful, false, misleading, double-dealing, hypocritical, and insincere. Now, I don't ever want that to be what people say about me.
Correct.
Because the opposite, the antonym of it, is this: candid, open, sincere, true, conscientious, moral, principled, virtuous, upstanding, righteous, all character qualities that we would see in the Lord Jesus Christ, right? And so if we're trying to change to be more like Christ, the whole premise of this is, personally speaking, we got to put off every form of lying and put on truthfulness.
Right. That's absolutely true. It's interesting you read that list, because when I got hired at American Airlines, I had friends write recommendation letters for me. And I never got to see, they just sent them in.
Right.
And several of the guys were guys that had gotten hired before me, and they were already working for the company. Those were the best ones. And this one guy named Frank Howard wrote a letter for me. I never saw it until the end of my first year at American. So you're on probation for the first year. And at the end of the first year, they have a little ceremony where you're off probation and you're officially now a pilot at the company and all of that stuff. And the guy the chief that I work for, my boss, he pulls out this stack of letters, right? And there's me and several other guys in the room. And he looks at me and he goes, I'm reading this one recommendation letter about you. He goes, this guy said you were an upright person. He goes, I've never met an upright person in my entire life. He goes, what does that even mean? And I thought, wow, that's a great recommendation letter, man. I want to be on the upright side of things, not on the scoundrel side of things. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Frank, wherever you are, thank you, man.
Yeah, right. But it's what you were characterized by.
Right.
We all lie. I mean, the scripture makes it clear we all lie.
Frank apparently never caught me in a lie.
Right. Yeah. But what are we characterized by? Now, having said that, why is lying such a big deal? Well, the very foundation of why lying is such a big deal is because it's a big deal to God. Right. Regardless of what it does in our earthly relationships or to our earthly reputation, what it says about our God is so important. And so let's look at just one verse to start with, although we'll be looking more into the scriptures. Proverbs 12:22 really lays the foundation. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. There's really no wiggle room there, right? It's very clear.
What do you mean by abomination?
What do you mean by abomination? Let me put it in simple English. God hates lies.
All right, so you could say exaggerating lips, manipulative lips,
withholding lips,
didn't tell you the whole story lips are an abomination to God.
And my personal favorite, painted in the best light for myself. Lips.
Light. Yes. Would I tell an untruth?
Yeah.
No,
yeah. So we want to base it on that foundation of what's it matter to God. But lies are destructive in every relationship in our life. Now, our focus really here at Thrive Tribe is marriage and parenting. So that's where we're going to focus today. But ladies and gentlemen, don't limit it.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me jump in because of the sensitive nature of the topic today, identifying whether somebody's lying to you or not. All right. The answer is absolutely yes if you're a parent. This is going to be a great tool for you. It's going to be a great tool for you to be able to identify whether your kids are telling you the truth or not. Should you use this against your spouse, or it's probably not going to turn out well if you do. All right. And so what we're going to recommend to you, and we don't make a lot of shameless plugs on this program, but you and I have had a counseling ministry for a number of years now. All right. And it's right here out of our home, and we have people come in for intensive counseling on weekends. If you believe that your spouse is hiding something, lying to you, instead of you being the police and trying to go out and unearth that, that's where you need to talk to them and seek counseling, either your own pastor or come to us, right? Reach out to us at characterhealth.com through the Contact Us tab, and we can start a dialogue with you about coming and getting counseling, because we're going to be those people. It's much better for us to draw out the lie and identify the lie than it is for you to do it. Right.
And we're gonna lay out why lying is so destructive to marriages. But on that topic of not becoming the personal Holy Spirit or the gotcha police, really, with your spouse. Some hope for those of you who there's just a sense that there's lying going on, but you can't catch it. Proverbs 19:9 says this: a false witness will not go unpunished. Right? God is bigger than we are, and he will punish that one who is lying. We don't have to bring that into our own hands, but often a counselor is what God will use to bring about that punishment. But for you, if you are the spouse and you're holding things back, and maybe they don't seem like a big deal, but we're going to talk in a minute about how little lies erode a marriage. Proverbs 26:28 says this. One more page in my Bible. It says, a lying tongue hates those it crushes. And really the message you're sending to your spouse, if you're choosing even the little lies, is that you hate them. Right? And I don't think any of us would say that. Hopefully no one would say that about our spouse. Right. But it's not what our intention is, it's what our action is.
Right, exactly.
All right, now having said that, Steve, why is lying, dishonesty, exaggeration, whatever we want to call it, so harmful to a marriage?
Well, it for a marriage especially, it kills intimacy. So there is no more intimate relationship on this planet than a husband-wife, right? And it's the thrive tribe, right? If you want to thrive in your marriage, you want to be intimate with your partner. And that's not just talking about sex. That's talking about emotional, spiritual intimacy. If there's no basis of honesty, all right, you know the other person's lying to you. You can see it in their eyes. You can see it in their body language. And all of the things that we're going to talk about here that to analyze whether they're lying to you or not, it kills that intimacy. And you're never and you're going to be hurting on the inside, knowing that you could be much closer to your spouse, but they're keeping you at arm's length via dishonesty.
Right. And you mentioned we've done a lot of premarital counseling, a lot of marriage counseling, and often spouses come into a marriage with deceit. We call it kind of a bag of garbage behind their back, right? They're walking down. It's a horrible picture of a beautiful bride or a handsome groom walking down the aisle with a hefty bag behind their back that's leaking garbage. Yeah. Right.
It's Genesis 2:25 is the verse that comes to mind, and you and I have done a lot of premarital counseling over the years. And when a couple's getting ready to get married, we always go to Genesis 2. And interestingly, this is a passage that gets read at almost every wedding. Every single wedding, we read Genesis 2:24. It says, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh, right? And then the pastor closes his Bible, and they say, let us pray, right? And it's just before the wedding ceremony begins. The very next verse, which finishes off the thought, says this, and the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Now, no pastor, no minister ever reads that verse. Why? Because everybody in the congregation would start giggling and thinking about the wedding night, and you'd lose the whole crowd right there. So he doesn't read that. But that's not what that verse is talking about, all right? Were they both naked, like no clothes on? Yes, they were. But the Hebrew here is much more deep than that. They weren't hiding anything from each other. They had no hidden baggage. They had no spiritual sin. They had no things that were not obvious to the other person. And so most couples go into marriage with a whole bunch of bags hidden behind their back. I don't want to tell them about that. We'll ignore that. We'll play up the strong parts. We'll play down the weak parts, and
time will take care of it.
Time will take care of that. And we have all sorts of things that we hide behind our back. Yeah. And the two of you are not truly naked in the sense of being transparent. You've got a lot of stuff hidden, and all that stuff comes out over time, and then it causes problems in the relationship. So
just a little personal anecdote to let people know us. Do you remember our rehearsal? And I know for sure our best man watches these Thrive Tribes, but we had our best man read that scripture, and he did read verse 25, and then he looked over at us with that Cheshire cat grin. Yes. And yes.
Fortunately, that was just at the rehearsal.
Just at the rehearsal.
And he didn't do it the day of the wedding.
So lies erode the foundation of a marriage. Correct. And it's, Romans tells us we're not to be conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of our mind. But one of the things that, if you're on social media, you see it over and over, there's articles written about it, is there's this new kind of wave of idea that a little bit of lying in a marriage is a good thing, because it keeps things spicy. And we would say that that's straight from the pit of hell.
Yeah.
John 8:44 says that Satan is the father of lies. When you lie, Satan is delighted.
Right. Don't buy into that stuff. I read an article years ago in Parent Magazine. Parent Magazine. And it said, lying is an important developmental step for children. So don't discourage it. No, absolutely discourage it.
And even more, it helps them be creative and imaginative. No,
you don't have to encourage that developmental step. Your kids know mine, and they know how to lie.
Yeah.
Right because they're born little sinners.
Yeah.
So you don't have to encourage that. You have to discourage that. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. Right. That's what lies. That's what says mine.
Exactly.
Right. The rod of discipline drives it far from them.
Well, you and I, just a visual for this. We were just out at the Outer Banks looking at a vacation home, and there's beautiful homes, beautiful, huge homes built in this one area of the Outer Banks that the water is washing up and eroding every day, and probably next summer they won't be there. They'll be in the North Atlantic, right?
Right now they have a beautiful oceanfront view. By this time next year, they'll probably have a beautiful ocean bottom view.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what lies do in a marriage.
They erode.
Even if we ignore them or we try to pretend it's not happening, they're eroding away the underpinnings.
Right.
So lying in marriage.
So we put together a little role play. Now let's jump into these 8 ways to identify whether somebody's lying or not. We put a little role play in, and I want to ask our audience, right? I want to ask you to just look at me. You're going to ask the questions.
Right.
You're going to play the role of the parent. I'm going to be a child.
Okay, so kind of laying the foundation for that, let's just say lying and parent with children is just as important as it is in marriage. We didn't really hit on that.
Right.
But children who can't be trusted with a little, as a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old, can't be trusted as a teenager if they can't be truthful.
You're going to analyze this and say, and you're going to figure out, do you think I'm lying or telling the truth?
Yes, and I'm such a good parent that I'm going to dig deep. You
Okay,
ready?
good.
So, son, Stevie, did you know that there's some cookies missing from the cookie jar?
No, no.
You didn't know there were any cookies missing?
No,
You didn't hear your siblings talking about, because I've already talked to your siblings about there being cookies missing from the cookie jar.
Oh, yeah, I get, now that you mention it, somebody did talk about some cookies missing. So yeah, I guess I do know, but I didn't take them. I don't know anything about that.
So you were aware that some cookies were missing.
Well, I guess technically, now that you mention it, yeah, I guess, I was aware of that.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you a question now.
Mm-hmm.
Did you take the cookies?
I can't believe you didn't say anything like that about me. I mean, I've got a stellar reputation around here, and honestly, frankly, nobody has ever asked me a question like that before, and you ask anybody, you ask any of the other kids, did Stevie take the cookies? They're going to say no, absolutely he didn't take the cookies, because I'm not the kind of kid that would do anything like that, And so no, I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm again, I'm probably the most trustworthy kid you have.
So if you didn't take the cookies, do you know who took the cookies?
Well, all I know is that, I'm not the kind of kid that would ever even consider taking cookies, and even asking me that question, do I know somebody that would take the cookies? Well, if I were to guess, I'd probably say Peter. Peter probably took the cookies.
So you think
he's shifty-eyed, he's evasive, he gives half answers. He says things like frankly and quite honestly, and to tell you the truth, he says things like that, and which kind of wants to make you want to dig deeper with Peter. I think that's where you need to go. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Stevie. Thank you for being so forthright.
Yeah.
With mommy.
I appreciate being of help. And by the way, you ever need an honest answer, I'm your guy. Come to me. You're going to get the truth all the time.
All right. Well, I hope watching this, your truth meter is a little bothered right now. But we want to kind of unwrap that role play and talk about some of the things, especially as a parent, because as a parent, we're in a unique role, right? Again, we're not going to judge our spouse, our boss, our neighbor for whether or not they're lying. We need to focus on ourselves. That's what this session primarily is about, is learning to self-evaluate. Do I do these things? But with our children, yeah, we're going to use some of these things, but we're going to use some technical terms for how you can recognize a liar, but then unwrap them.
Right.
All right.
So one of the things I want to say before we start into these 8 different areas is this. Now, those of you who are analyzing our little role play just now, you might be inclined to go, he's lying. He was fidgeted, he played with his nose, he grabbed his ear, he was looking around, he wouldn't make eye contact. We're gonna do things in what we call clusters. Okay, it's got to be more than one thing. You can't pick on any one thing and go, that's it, they're lying. We got it. They're going to come in 2s or 3s or mores, and once you get 2 or 3 or 4 of these things all together, then you go, okay, I got a pretty good idea that the person is, as we say, being deceptive. Okay, when we say somebody's lying, it's just a little harsh, but they're being deceptive. They're not being straightforward with us, right? Those sort of things. So if you look at any one thing, because you might listen and analyze what I said, and you go, well, he said he didn't do it. Right? He denied it. And he gave a very lengthy answer.
Well, no, you didn't deny it, actually. You never
well,
did.
that's one of the keys,
yeah,
right? So we'll get into that. Okay.
So let me just follow on with what you said. We have 4 boys of our own, 3 grand boys. If I simply based it on, boy, you were really wiggling when you were answering me,
right,
I could be dead wrong. Right?
Correct.
There are children that are going to wiggle. It's more
let's
than one
jump into
thing.
these 8 things.
All right. So the first one is this. We need to, liars tend to analyze versus speculating. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So let's unwrap the difference between analyzing and speculating. We don't want you to become speculators. We don't want you to become, well, he had his arms folded, he was guilty.
Okay.
Right?
Not the liars, the listeners.
Right. I read that in a magazine once. Somebody has their arms folded, that means they're guilty. Right? They're being defensive when they're doing like this. No, you're speculating about it might be cold. Right? We said that earlier.
Yeah.
This is an anchor point, by the way, for people with their arms. It's uncomfortable. A lot of people don't know what to do,
especially at this table.
especially if they're getting confronted about something. You can expect, if you're a parent and you're confronting a child, that child's going to be nervous. Well, they were acting nervous. Well, wouldn't you if your parent was confronting you on the stolen cookie?
Yeah.
Right? And telling the truth, you would be nervous. And so there might be a certain amount of fidgeting or arm folding. So, again, that isn't necessarily a thing all in itself. So just try to resist the urge to speculate. The next one is this. Identify the stimulus, all right? The question that you are asking. When I ask a question, I want that person to show deceptive behaviors. And that's where we're going to talk about the clusters, right? It's all about the timing. For one thing, they're probably going to give you a deceptive answer within the first 5 seconds, right? So the first 5 seconds are really important, or they're going to start their deceptive answer in that first 5 seconds. But they're going to give it to you in clusters. So look for clusters of 2 or more of deceptive behaviors. That's analyzing versus just speculating on what you see, okay?
Right.
So the analysis here is in the first 5 seconds and more than 2 of these
other things we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's the second one on our list?
The second one is manipulation bias.
Okay, manipulation bias is a really important one. And here's why. Our own bias will come through. If you have a bias about people of a certain color, you might bring that into whether you think they're guilty or not, right? That's really been in the news a lot. And so you got to be careful about that. You got to understand, just because somebody has a certain color of their skin or certain ethnicity or certain background, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're lying, or they might be nervous in a certain situation. So again, you've got to be mature and discerning and understand that if you're a person of authority and you're asking somebody a point blank question, they're probably going to be nervous. And so just being fidgety doesn't do it. So you got to analyze your own bias, especially with children. If my kid's lips are moving, they're lying. Well, yeah, in our house that was fairly true, but not always true.
But it may go the other way too. If you have certain children in your home that you're more tender towards, we had a child who was sick 99% of the time. I had to fight the urge to cut her brakes.
Right.
and to assume where I would assume all the others were lying, maybe assume she was truthful just because I feel more tender toward her.
Right.
And moms who are particularly compassionate are going to have trouble recognizing lies because that's harsh. I don't want to say my child lies.
They don't ever want to think that any of their kids are bad or tell a lie 10 times a day, right? So they're always going to give them cut a break and,
give them a pass.
And now be manipulated by that child. Okay, so you got to look at your own manipulation bias. The other is now you have to look at, is that other person, now that I'm asking the question, are they trying to manipulate me? And so how do you identify whether they're manipulating you? Well, if you ask them a question, number one, they'll try to over-explain the answer, right? Now
think about, obvious.
Think about when the kids were little, they were really transparent with this. They would go into this long-winded explanation of the whole thing and everything unrelated to it, and you go, wow, you're really trying to sell this one.
Yeah.
Right? If you get that feeling you're trying to be sold on something,
they're acting.
They're probably trying to sell you on something. And I've had guys in the Navy. I've had captains and commanders and that we were counseling and talking to, that they were trying to. They gave a whole 20-minute long-winded explanation and never answered the question because they're trying to sell you on something. Right?
Well, we've had it at the counseling table where we ask a direct question and it goes to, well, I found these DVDs on the shelf and they make me think about this. And you go, no.
What does that have to do with anything?
You're changing the subject here.
Right? And they'll speak in platitudes, right? They'll talk in generalities, and they'll share with you this long-winded story about how wonderful they are and how virtuous they are, and what a great team they've created at their workplace, and how well their stock is doing, or how anybody would never think anything like that of them because of, and they throw one platitude after another. So again, they're trying to manipulate you through over-explaining and throwing platitudes at you, right? For instance, here's a good question to ask a child. Did you take the cookie without permission? Now, if you get this answer, how could you say that about me? Again, if your child answers a question with a question,
right,
you're probably being manipulated, right? Because they didn't answer the question. The other answer would be, I have a stellar reputation in this family. I can't believe that you would even think that about me, right? That's another long-winded, evasive answer, and or over-explaining, or no one has ever accused me of stealing before. Well, this might be the first time that you've been accused of that,
exactly.
But you're not exactly answering the question. So again, there's manipulation bias, and look for it in how the answer is framed to you. If somebody's trying to over-explain and they do it in platitudes, they're probably trying to manipulate you.
Especially those of you who are compassionate.
Yes.
You gotta.
If you're compassionate and merciful, you're really going to.
God takes it seriously, so we have to.
Absolutely.
Okay. The third is this: evasiveness.
Okay, so manipulation bias and evasiveness are kind of two sides of the same coin. So the same person that tries to over-explain is also going to be very kind of evasive in their answer. If you ask a question and the person talks for 10 minutes and never really answers the question, you have to ask yourself, was there a failure to deny? And usually that's the case.
Yeah.
If somebody didn't do something, the first thing out of their mouth is, absolutely not. I didn't do it. Now, if you ask them a follow-on question, they might explain, everybody here thinks that you did it. Explain to me how you did it. I wasn't even in the room. I was in St. Louis, Ohio, or St. Louis, Missouri at the time, and I didn't do it. And I can prove it to you. Here's the thing. Somebody who's not guilty, they're going to be righteously indignant. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But they're not going to be evasive. But if you get a 10-minute answer and they don't ever really deny, and you most of the time as a parent or as a spouse, you walk away from those episodes and you go, all right, I guess they didn't do it. I guess maybe I got it wrong. You're kind of second-guessing yourself, but somewhere deep down in your gut you go, they also didn't exactly deny it.
Yeah, there's a fine-tuning. Because I think of the times that maybe I've said to a child, did you take cookies from the cookie jar? And the correct answer is, did you take a cookie? And so they say, no, I didn't take cookies from the cookie jar. Now in their little larcenous heart, they know they took a cookie.
Right.
But technically, they're answering the question without answering the question.
And in our modern vernacular, or at least in the last 30 years, it depends on what the definition of is.
Right. But again, children are so transparent, because I remember at one point I had a cookie jar that I really, really loved, and you and I were out to eat, but we had a child with us that not everyone at home realized the child was us. They thought he might be at a friend's house, and so we got a phone call, and they said, your Winnie the Pooh cookie jar got broken, and it was Nate. Well, the problem was Nate was with us, right? Because kids are so transparent in their, I'm not going to point at myself. I'm going to evade answering who did this.
Right. It's always whoever wasn't there that's going to get blamed,
yeah,
right?
it's tough to be out of the room when bad things happen.
Number one on the evasiveness is, do they give you a long-winded answer, but they fail to deny? Yeah. All right, that's number one. Number two is what we call exclusionary qualifiers. Now, you and I did it at the beginning of the show. You said, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling these days? And I said, well, quite honestly, or well, fundamentally, or well, not really. And I gave you some disqualifiers in there, right? So, for instance, let's say you say to me, hey, Steve, is this outfit that I'm wearing appropriate for a Thrive Tribe episode? And I say something along the lines of, well, for the most part.
Yeah, it leaves a little doubt.
Right. So right away, what does your brain do?
Yeah, there's something wrong with it.
Oh, what's wrong with it then? Oh, no, not really. I guess it's fine.
And we help one another with this, because
right.
I will say to you, is this an appropriate outfit? And I want you to tell the truth.
Right.
Because sometimes I think we try to soften it for one another, right. not recognizing that what we're doing is
so look for
deceitful.
Exclusionary qualifiers in their answer. If they say things like, for the most part, fundamentally, not really, then those are the sort of things that there are a half-truth. And again, a half-truth is a half a lie, right? Yeah. So there you go. Evasiveness. All right.
All right. The next one is this, aggression.
Okay. So aggression's really easy to identify. And now that aggression is different than righteous indignation. And we always knew our kids were telling the truth when you would accuse them of something. Because a question tends to be an accusation. Did you take a cookie out of the cookie jar? Right. No, I didn't do that. Absolutely not. I wasn't even anywhere in the house. I was over at my friend's house. Okay, well then that's righteous indignation. Right. And they would always be real adamant that they didn't do it, and they defend themselves clearly and concisely. When a child goes from 0 to white hot anger for no apparent reason, we had one of these just the other day with one of our teenagers. He went from 0 to white hot anger over a question. And I thought, ooh, there's defensiveness, right? And he's being defensive because he's wrong, right? There's two reasons. Either you're wrong or I've assigned a motive to your behavior. In that case, I hadn't assigned any motive. I just asked him a question, and he was wrong. And so he went from 0 to that pretty fast, all right? If a child says something like this, you always think it's me. This family is so unfair. I can't believe every time something goes wrong in this family, you always pin it on me. Okay. Yeah. Why did you go straight there? Right. That's an aggressive, it makes you pay for asking the question.
Well, and you mentioned righteous indignation, and one of the maybe qualifiers that we watch for with righteous indignation is there's a certain adamancy behind it. And sometimes we would say to a child who was saying the words, no, I didn't do it, you lack the strength of your conviction. Right. Because you could see, you would hear the words, but they were hollow. Yeah,
they didn't have that strong felt gut reaction. Yeah. The other part of aggression is this. There's that 0 to angry instantaneously. And then there's the aggression or attacks on a third party. All right. So let's say you say, did you take the cookie jar? And you go, you guys always accuse me of this sort of thing. And then the child immediately says, this family is so unfair. You treat everybody else better than me, right? That's an attack on a third party. What does everybody else have to do?
Do you even notice that?
If you're at work, I don't have the resources I need to do my job properly. And if I did do that, which I didn't, right. Okay, it would be completely understandable because I haven't been given the proper resources to do my job the right way. Oh, well, you just admitted to it, right? Right. But you're trying to blame somebody else for your, where did that show up in the Bible?
Genesis?
Genesis, right? Yeah. God, it's the woman you gave me.
Right.
The accusation was at God, right? But it was because of the third party.
And it was a lie.
Yeah. 0 to angry with no reason is aggression. Okay?
All right. The next is this. When people are convincing us rather than conveying.
Okay. So we have to talk about the difference between convincing and conveying, all right? Truth conveys an answer. Deception tries to convince you of something. Now, we've talked about this in principle already, the long-winded answer, the explaining something way too much, trying to get you to manipulating you to buy into it. That's all trying to convince you. Did you take the cookie? I've never been questioned before. I'm a great kid around this house. I mean, compared to all the rest,
I don't even like sweets.
I don't even like sweets. No one has ever questioned my integrity before this moment. And they're trying to convince you of something. Now, they've not denied it. Right. They're just trying to convince you of how wonderful they are. Right? And here's where the parent gets suckered in on that. This might be a wonderful kid. And they might not be characterized by doing this, but they actually did it. Mm-hmm. And so now you got to kind of turn the corner, and they're selling you on all their strong points. And if you're a merciful parent, you're going to go, oh, yeah, you're right. I guess I shouldn't have come after you. And you falsely accuse the kid that didn't do it because that's the pole vaulter who always does everything wrong. And this time they didn't. So, again, truth conveys an answer, and deception tries to convince. It was a few years ago now, but if you remember from the history books, there was a woman named Susan Smith she drowned her children. She strapped them in their car seats in the car, pushed the car into a pond, and then came out in the media, and she was all distraught. And, somebody hijacked the car, and I don't know what my kids are. She was all upset for a couple of days. She comes running into the police department the moments after she did this, trying to sell the police on somebody hijacked her car. And she's distraught, and she's crying and hysterical and everything else. And they ask her what happened. Well, somebody hijacked my car. I don't know where my kids are. And when they found out that the kids were in the pond, they said to her, did you have anything to do with this? Her answer was, I love my children. I would never hurt my kids. Over and over again. I would never do anything like this. I love my children. That's not exactly a denial.
Right.
Right? And the other part of it is this. Wouldn't isn't didn't.
Yeah.
And that's the takeaway with convincing versus conveying. If you're trying to figure out whether they're trying to convince you or convey the truth, wouldn't isn't didn't. So if somebody says, I didn't do it, that's pretty convincing.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying to convey the truth to you. If they're trying to convince you that they didn't do it, they would say, I wouldn't do anything like that.
That's answering a question you didn't ask.
Right. How could you say something like that about me?
Yeah.
Wouldn't isn't didn't. Look for didn't.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, here's the next one. Dressing up a lie.
Okay. So dressing up a lie, again, is now there's some more little things that people will say. They'll say things like, well, to tell you the truth, right? Just between you and me, honestly, frankly, you see, that's dressing up a lie. We're going to tell you half the truth, part of the truth, none of the truth, but we're
softening it a little bit.
But we're going to tell you in the beginning we're being honest with you.
Yeah.
Honestly, and you're being suckered in on those. So that's what dressing up a lie. So look for those little tells on that.
Well, and those are the ones that I call painting the lie so I look better, right? We dress up the lie so that, probably I did lie, but it's not as bad as you think it is.
Right.
I had a really good reason for lying.
Yep.
All right, one last one, nonverbals.
Okay,
and this is so important.
Yeah, and this is huge. Now we're talking about clusters. There's got to be more than a couple of these things together for you to draw a positive conclusion. But nonverbals go like this. Kids, did you take the cookie? I definitely did not take the cookie. And your child is adamantly shaking their head. I did not take the cookie. They're trying to sell you on it, but their nonverbal is telling you they might as well be doing this. Yeah. I absolutely took the cookie. Right? And so they're trying to oversell you with some nonverbal. Kids are pretty transparent, especially the younger ones that they are. And I did it when you were doing role playing. I did I call it talking to their shoes.
Yeah.
I always knew when the kids were little when they were lying because they'd immediately answer their shoes. And they put their head down and they go, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't believe you'd say those sort of things about me. I think you need to go check out Peter because he's that kind of kid. And they talk to their shoes. You go, okay, well, you're guilty. So first of all, you're being evasive. You're not giving me, you're trying to convince me. That's 2. And your nonverbal is you're talking to your shoes. Now, if you're not guilty, You're going to look me in the eye for the most part. You're not going to fidget a whole bunch. And you're going to say, no, I didn't do that. That's it.
Well, we want to close this out talking to parents because you know what? Sometimes our kids' lies are absolutely hilarious, right?
Yeah. Well, before you jump into that,
okay.
I just want to do a couple more things with nonverbals. Because the nonverbals are not just as much as your kids. That's really easy. When they're 3 years old, they look at their shoes.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about anchor points. And this is an anchor point. What do you do with your hands when you're being questioned, right? Or your arms? The other is your feet. Your feet are usually on the ground, or ladies tend to cross their legs. When ladies cross their legs and they've got the one foot dangling, that's a really good anchor point to look for. If you ask them a point blank question, that foot starts to go like that, and then they're being evasive with their answer, or they say to you things like, well, to tell you the truth, or honestly, or frankly, and the foot's going, that's a cluster.
Right.
There's a couple of 3 things going on there, right? So those are things to look for. Grooming gestures, constantly checking a watch, adjusting your tie. Boy, it's getting warm in here, those sort of things. And movement to the face. So when you're telling a lie, your body, it's that fight or flight mode that you get into. And instinctively, your body goes into that flight mode or fight mode. And all the blood in your body goes to your core organs, but it goes away from your extremities. So what happens when blood goes away from your extremities? They begin to itch.
Yeah.
They feel uncomfortable. So that's when you'll see somebody start wringing their hands.
Yeah.
Now, if that's all you see, that's not enough. But if they're being evasive or saying frankly or quite honestly, or they're trying to sell you on some story and they're rubbing their hands, or they're all of a sudden they're doing like this because their nose itches or their ear itches, now you've got a cluster. So those are all little, there's grooming things, there's little anchor points, and then there's just basic nonverbals. If
their nose grows,
and if that's if they get a whole thing, we use the grow on the end. Easy. Don't you wish?
All right, so we want to close talking to parents, and as I was saying, sometimes your kids' lies are absolutely hilarious. However, we don't have the freedom to laugh at it, because things that are left unchecked become habits for life, right? And we said how God feels about lying is it's an abomination. He hates lies. So as you evaluate your children, which you're going to do, you need to look for what they're characterized by, because there are certain children that, like Steve said, if their lips are moving, man, they're lying.
They're lying.
You just know they're lying.
Yeah.
And there's a verse for that too. In the Proverbs, it says, "Oh Lord, protect me from lying lips." That's like a parent verse. Please, please. But there are other children that are characterized by truthfulness. Now, everyone lies, right? But their characterization is truthfulness. So when they lie, you still have to teach into it. You can't go, well, they don't lie, so I'm really not going to bring it up. We still have to teach into it. Now, one thing we want to really encourage parents, because what we have seen with parents is you maybe get to the point where your child tells you the truth and you punish them for whatever they've done. And then we follow on with this question. Why did you do that? Why did you hit your sister? Why did you call your brother a name? Why did you stick your tongue out at the neighbor, right? And the scripture tells us not to exasperate our children. And I think we fall right into it when we ask them why. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, sure. If in the middle of the conflict, if you say to the kids, why did you lie to me? Or why did you do that? Are you expecting at that moment that the kid's going to become completely transparent and all of a sudden tell you the entire truth? They're not going to do that.
Which is going
to make it worse. You asked a question that's going to make things worse.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to all of a sudden come and go, Mom, I'm glad you asked me that question. I think I need therapy. I'm a pathological liar, and I really hate my sister, and I really don't respect your authority. And if you want a truly honest and forthright answer, that's really the truth. That's not going to happen when you ask that question. They're going to lie because it's another awkward question. So be careful how you phrase the question.
Right. There is a time for that question, but it's not between parent and child. It's really parent to parent. Why do you think that happened? Is there something we're missing? Right. Well, this has been really illuminating, and we made a deal in the beginning. I'm not talking about you.
And I'm not talking about you.
Yes, there you go. Right. We hope this has been helpful. Again, this is for you to first of all self-evaluate. Right. This is not to go, head out into town and start evaluating all the liars.
Come to lying
That
police.
is not your job.
Right? Yeah.
You have a unique role with your children, but the biggest role is to look in the mirror, especially the mirror of the Word of God, and say, you know what? Do I tell half truths? Do I deflect? Do I Do I try to paint myself in a little
Do I
better
tell
light?
long-winded stories trying to deflect away from,
Exactly.
If you're that person, you need to self-analyze.
Yeah, this is a big deal in God's eyes, and that means it needs to be a big deal in ours.
Amen.
So thanks for joining us for this episode of Thrive Tribe. I'm Megan.
And I'm Dr. Steve.
And we'll see you next time.
Well, thanks for watching that clip on YouTube. Remember to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our weekly content. See you soon.